to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
Welcome back to the Leo Training Podcast. As I continue with my ramp up to the Rio Olympics, we have another guest coming from the rowing community. This week's guest is Adam Kreek. Adam is a 2008 Olympic gold medalist. During his 13-year rowing career, Adam won over 60 medals, including 43 gold medal performances. Adam is also a journalist, adventurer, and social entrepreneur, and is a corporate trainer as well. His team at Kreek has found their purpose by offering relevant, powerful, and transformative teaching on personal leadership and effective teamwork. The method they use is to communicate key lessons on high performance, framed in compelling narratives and supported by cutting-edge research. This formula helps change perspectives, behaviors, and ultimately organizational culture. Adam and I will be diving deep into rowing, performance, training, as well as health and fitness, and how his current work is helping organizations and businesses around the world. Without further ado, let's roll to episode 28 of the Leo Training Podcast, Adam Kreek on Kreek Speak. Adam Kreek, welcome to the Leo Training Podcast. Thanks for coming on to the show. It's awesome to have you here.
Roar! Leo the lion.
I love it. I love it. I had a feeling you were going to do something like that. Awesome.
Well, it's good to be here, and it's good to chat some rowing, chat some fitness, and I'm looking forward to a conversation, and I hope that it's educational for all the people who are listening in.
Yeah, me too. I think we're going to have a blast. I definitely know we're going to have a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll crack some jokes along the way. But for those that don't know, Adam, why don't you give a little bit of your background? You're probably best known for being a mainstay on the Canadian men's national rowing team, Olympic gold medalist in 2008. But you're doing some excellent work since you've retired from professional rowing. So if you kind of bring the audience up to speed on what you're doing now and your rowing career.
Okay, well, let's step way back. I grew up in London, Ontario, and that's where I first started rowing. After about 2 years of rowing, my coach took me aside and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Adam, you're an Olympian. You just don't know it yet." And, I looked at him and I thought, first, that sounds like a lot of work. And two, just wasn't really sure if that was a path for me or not. But it did plant a seed, and I rowed through the rest of high school. After high school, I took a year off. I worked on an oil rig up in northern Alberta, so slammed around some heavy, hard steel.
Nice.
And I would say hard manual labor is probably one of the best cross-training pieces for rowing. And I think it really set me up when I went to university the following year at the University of Victoria. I trained there for 2 years under Howie Campbell. We won the Canadian University Rowing Championships. Then I dropped out of university and trained full-time with the Canadian Olympic team in Victoria, BC on Elk Lake. We went to the Olympics in 2004. We won the World Championships the previous year, won the Royal Henley and a bunch of other races. Then we choked at the Olympic Games. So it was a very sad, embarrassing, sort of moment. After that, I got connected with Craig Amerkanian from Stanford University, who is a former freshman coach at Cal University, and I finished up my college rowing career there. And after rowing for Stanford, and we're we did a lot of firsts there too. Brought the team to beat Cal in Washington for the first time in years and years. And the guys, the year after I left, went to the IRAs and won silver, which was pretty cool. And 5 of those guys, that I helped out, ended up going to the Olympics in 2012, and I watched them all compete, which was pretty inspiring to see those guys take it all the way to the international level. Then myself in 2008, I went to the Olympics in the men's 8, the Canadian men's 8, again, training under Mike Spracklin. We had won the world championships the year before, but this time we actually followed through. We won Olympic gold. It was incredible. Then after the Olympics in 2008, I knew I was done. I didn't want to compete at that level. I didn't want to train at that level. The pain was just a lot. But more than that, it was the time commitment. I felt like there were more things in life I wanted to experience. Then a couple years after the Olympics, I found I was still interested in rowing, wanted to do something compelling. So I put together a project with a guy by the name of Jordan Hansen from Seattle. We built an organization called OAR Northwest. That's OAR Northwest. And we put together an education and research vessel, and we took it across the Atlantic Ocean. We left from Dakar, Senegal, and we were attempting to land in Miami, Florida. We had some bad luck. Our sleeping cabin flooded during a shift change, and our boat capsized in the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh my God.
But I will say the time I spent on the ocean is something I'll never forget. And it was one of the most incredible times of my life. You're out there in the wilderness with your buddies. You're connecting with nature. You're connecting with incredible people. You're seeing wildlife, sunrises, sunset. You're forced to see the stars every night. It's incredible. And then after that, family had started. So I have kids, and now how I stay involved in rowing, I hook up with Masters Cruise, and we go to the Head of the Charles or over to San Diego Crew Class, the Masters Worlds, and doing some stuff like that. But it's again more of a weekend warrior thing for me now. It's a way to stay fit, because I have to be fit enough to race this race. It's a way to stay connected with a community that I really care about. There's always great people who race, but it's not necessarily obsessive. I'm not necessarily racing to win, although winning always makes it more fun. I'm racing to have a fit, good lifestyle. And so, all this being said, now professionally, I'm a keynote speaker. I'm an ambassador for the Canadian Men's Health Foundation, and I'm a freelance journalist with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I've got a column online. You can check me out at kreekspeak.com, and you can see my online column at cbc.ca/kreekspeak.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely be sure to include all those components in the show notes, the links, so that people can follow up and check those out. So you've had an incredible journey. So I guess the first thing I would kind of like to start with, we got some topics, but one of the ones that just comes off the mind from you sharing your career so far is how does training at the high performance level compare to that experience that you had doing the open water? That totally different, of course, but it's one's you're going for to achieve at the highest level, and the other one is kind of more of an experience and stuff, but you're also kind of out in the ocean by yourself.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. From a physical standpoint, it's a different challenge. When you're out in the wilderness, you only really want to push yourself to 80% of your max. The issue being, because you are so vulnerable and because you are so exposed, if you're pushing yourself to the absolute limit in the wilderness, you're not going to come back. Because bad things happen all the time. That's why you call it adventure. So you need to have, this extra reserve that's always in the background. Whereas when you're training for the Olympics, you have your workout that's an hour and a half or 2 hours or however long it is. And in that workout, you absolutely door yourself. And then you take time off, and then you go back and you do it again. And then you take time off and you go and you do it again. In a rowing boat, you have your shifts, which are 4 hours, 2 hours, or 1 hour shifts that you're rowing, and you take time off. But sometimes on your time off, it's a storm, so you can't really sleep. And it's a really, it can be really stressful on your body, and you're not sleeping for 8 hours in a row. You've broken up your sleep into 4 hour, 2 hour, or 1 hour segments, as well on this boat. So there's a period of exhaustion there. But the one thing I noticed rowing across the ocean from a physical adaptation standpoint is that everyone on our boat between, say, day 25 and day 35, adapted to the sea. And you go through this process. It's interesting. You push off, and you're pushing off from Africa. Picture this. You're rowing away, and you're pumped. You're with three of your friends. You're going out in the wilderness, and it's time to go. So you're like, yeah, we're going. We're rowing across the ocean. We're rowing across the ocean. And then day 3 kicks in, and you're starting to get seasick. You're starting to get wet. There's like sores showing up on your body. And about day 5, you hit almost rock bottom. You haven't been able to eat for a couple days because you're still adjusting to the sea. Your sleep schedule, like I said, you're sleeping in 1 hour, 2 hour, or 4 hour shifts around the block. So you're still adjusting to the sleep schedule. Your body's aching because you've been rowing for 12 hours every day. You're just like, why did I do this? I am a dumb man. and then by about day 10, you feel like, okay, I can tolerate this. And there's periods where it's magical. You have, say, a stampede of dolphins. We call it a super pod of dolphins. So picture thousands and thousands of dolphins coming by your boat and screaming like, or whales coming up swimming beside your boat, or the stars are gorgeous and beautiful at night. And there's magical moments, but still it's a bit of a slog. But then day 25 to 35, all of a sudden something flips over in your brain, and you think, wow, I can really do this, and I can really thrive in this environment, and I really enjoy it here. And it was interesting afterwards because it happened to all 4 of us on the boat in this time frame. And when I dove into the scientific literature, I realized there were studies out there that monitored spacemen and airmen from the 1940s, 1950s. And have you ever heard this? People say it all the time. It takes 30 days to establish a habit, or it takes 40 days to establish a habit, or 20 days to establish a habit.
Right.
And you're thinking, like, where does this number come from? Is it just like motivational collective wisdom, or is there actually some scientific proven basis to this fact? And this study put mirrored glasses on the eyeballs of these spacemen and airmen. And for every single waking hour, they had to look at the world upside down. So whenever their eyes were open, the glasses were on, the world was upside down. So as you can imagine, it's really disorienting.
Yeah.
And they put these guys in brain scans, and they monitored how they developed. And they found between this period of, say, 25 to 35 days, everyone's brain adjusted to these mirrored glasses, and the world looked right side up to them again. So there tends to be this, neurological phenomenon that all of us have as humans, that it takes about 30 days to adapt to something brand new and have it seem like it's normal. And so there's that was an interesting learning from the trip, from the adventure. And even myself, when I go on family adventures, I threw my kids in a van, and we drove down to San Diego and drove back up. I noticed the exact same sort of pattern existed, especially with like really young kids. Day 5, the kids aren't sleeping, they're screaming, people are getting sick, and you're thinking, why do I do this? This is crazy. And then by about day 10, you're like, okay, yeah, we can handle this. And then right near the end of the trip, when it was about 30 days into the trip, we were everybody got it. we knew how to do it. We knew how to live in a van. We knew how to travel. Everyone was cool with it. We knew how to sleep. And so I think it's for the people listening out there who are, trying to adopt some new training plan, some sort of new, training, schedule. And if you acknowledge that it's going to be exciting when you first start, that it's going to feel really horrible and you're really going to question it about 5 to 10 days in, you can tolerate it after that. And then it becomes really normal, say between day 25 and 35.
That's cool. That's really interesting to see that, I guess across, different areas, both in terms of like the experience you had during the open water rowing and then the trip with your family. The adaptation process is very, very similar.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And you notice that too, when you show up to a training center. Yeah. I remember showing up first to the Canadian Training Center and thinking there is no way I could possibly do the amount of work that is being demanded of me. But you do it, and eventually it just becomes normal. If it becomes normal rowing, 20K every workout and like rowing 50K a day. It's unbelievable what you can adapt to, huh? Mm-hmm.
Very, very cool. So let's, one of the topics that you and I had down that we wanted to discuss was, the differences between dynamic rowing machines and static rowing machines, and then how they impact the athlete's body.
Yeah, well, I've become a very big fan of dynamic rowing machines in the last couple of years. When I was training for the Olympics, we only used static rowing machines, partially because they were the ones that we had available. My coach, he was a crotchety old British man, Mike Spracklin. And he didn't really, to be honest, he didn't necessarily believe in the rowing machine, nor did he really believe in the weight room. And he's like, well, we'll do this because the physiologists are telling me to do this, but I've never known anyone to win an Olympic gold medal by erging. But he liked it because we would hop on the rowing machines. It removed a bunch of variables. I'd be looking over at the guy beside me, and if he's pulling a split that's 1 second lower than me, then I try to catch up with him, right? And we really played off each other. It was a really good way to work really, really hard. The issue that I had, especially near the end of my rowing career, is low back problems. And what I found on the stationary rowing machine, it puts a higher focus on the shoulders. It's easier to lunge. If you want to game the static rowing machine, you just kind of lunge your body at the catch, lunge it at the finish, and you're going to get a lower score, but it's also going to put a lot more strain on your low back. Scientists have done studies, and they've shown that a dynamic rowing machine puts about 10 times less force on your low back than a static rowing machine does. So the static or the dynamic rowing machine that I have right now is an RP3 Row Perfect, and I'm loving it. It has a great a display. They've got an Android tablet that hooks up to it, nice. And so you've got a live force curve that you can look at, which is very great, even just from a technical standpoint. Because again, in my technique, I lunge at the catch. That's my thing that I always do. You can watch my Olympic race, and I'm lunging at the catch and skying my blade. And that's always been something that I've been looking at. But when I sit on the dynamic erg and I'm watching the force curve, I notice that there's a spike and a line and then a spike if I lunge my catch. And so I can look at it and say, okay, if I make that first part of the curve completely smooth, I know that I'm keeping my technique in line. I'm keeping it in order. And it's a really good feedback mechanism. And I also like it tells you your stroke length. That was always something that we worked on. Again, at the Canadian Training Center, we length. We always tried to get the stroke as long as we could. And we spent winters rowing at rate 16, rate 18, competing against one another just to groove in this long catch, long finish so that we could get as much, power as possible, because power is force times distance. So again, I'm a big fan of the dynamic rowing machine, and I'd say I've also noticed, here I'm rambling here. Well, I've also noticed that with this dynamic rowing machine, with the Rowing Perfect, the seat is unstable, so it wobbles back and forth, and side to side, front and back, and so it tends to have a little bit more core engagement. So I've noticed athleticism in other events too. When I'm doing body weight exercises, when I'm moving around the world, that there's more core strength and more transferable strength from this machine to other things than the static machine. And I've also noticed when I spend extensive time on the Row Perfect, my Concept 2 score drops. And it's sitting down I sat down on the static rowing machine 2 days ago. I was in Chicago, and with an event, and I sat down there, and I hadn't been on one for a while, and I was just amazed at the connection I felt to the flywheel, and I was just able to ram it up. It was pretty fun.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that ability, like you're talking about, you sit on the dynamic rowing machines, and how the seat kind of moves underneath you. Similar to what you would experience in a rowing shell. I mean, that's building that reflexive stability that you're not gonna experience on a static rowing machine. So that's huge in terms of that transference, because your body, your nervous system has to constantly adapt and engage to transfer force from the foot plate to the handle. So that's really cool.
Well, and that's what you want. We live in a dynamic environment, and especially if you're someone who likes to do dynamic things. If you want to do more than just walk down paved concrete roads, if you want to get out there into the beach, into the mountains, into the rivers, into the oceans, like, nature is unstable, and we're built to be in unstable environments. And so it's nice to have a piece of exercise equipment that realizes that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things I wanted to point out too was just everything you were describing in terms of the dynamic rowing machine and static, and the forces that it places on the body. So I wrote a article for Row 2K several weeks ago, and it compared the rowing shell to the static ergs, both on the sliders and then static completely. Yeah. And what they found is that the demands placed on the body on the static machines required greater range of motion through the trunk, right, through the upper body, and then on the boat you needed greater range of motion through the hips, knees, and ankles. So the demands placed on the body are totally different. So the forces placed on the athlete are thereby different, and because the demands are placed and the demands and forces are different, the requirements that the athlete needs are going to be a lot different. You need greater mobility through the hips and the ankles and the thoracic spine when you're in the rowing shell on the water, and you need really good T-spine mobility when you're on the erg. Because you're going to get more of the length that you're talking about, that compression through the upper body. You're not going to be able to get it through the seat so much in the hips.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that too, because when I would erg a lot, and I did that at Stanford University because I was in school, and like, that's just how you cram in more work. And I would have, my thoracic would get so bunched up and so knotted up. I'd go to the corners of walls, where the corners stick out.
Yeah.
And I'd stick that corner of the wall right in my thoracic area, and I would just spend minutes and minutes every day just trying to work out that tightness. And my chiropractor, I used a chiropractor my entire training as well. And that's those were the two places where they'd always focus was the thoracic and the low back, to make sure that, all my discs were, my spine was moving properly in there. But definitely after a lot of erging, thoracic spine just tightens right up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and it's unbelievable the amount of force that's generated. I believe if I'm quoting right, I'll put this in the show notes, but off the top of my head, I think it's from the British Journal of Sports Medicine. I think it's like 4,400 newtons is placed on the low back each rowing stroke. So wow. It's a lot of force.
Yeah,
it's a lot of force that is being transferred onto the body, and that's why, again, speaking to your point about having that engagement of the core is so important, because if that area of the body is not functioning properly and it's not reflexively stabilizing, something has to pick up the slack, and that's when injuries happen.
Yeah, and we don't want to get injured.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. Any time out, especially with stuff like that, is not fun, and it is, it takes a toll on the body for sure. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
About injuries, or injury prevention?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's, I'll talk about my own personal experience with injuries. I found at the National Training Center, and when I've seen Olympic level athletes, when you're talking about that level of training, mm-hmm. if you are not on the boundary of injury, you're not training hard enough. So that's Olympic level athletics. So you want to be on the cusp of being injured at all times, because that means that you're pushing your body to the maximum. Obviously, you don't want to be injured to a point where you're out of training for multiple weeks on end, but your body will constantly give you niggles, mm-hmm. and that's just showing you that you are training hard enough.
Adam, is that when you say that, just so like it's clear to the audience? I mean, you're saying that's what's required to be at that level. Like that's how the intensity, sort of on a day-to-day basis, that's how much you're, pushing yourself individually, and the athletes around you are pushing each other.
Yes. Yeah, that's how hard you're pushing. And that is the intensity required. It's, every body has a breaking point. Mm. And some bodies have a breaking point that's less than others. Some bodies have a breaking point that's greater than others. And, the athletes that make it, to the Olympics, and then make it to the Olympic finals, and make it to the podium, are the ones who have, a propensity to have a strong body, but they also have that mental fortitude to push that body to the point of injury. Whereas some people have, your ligaments might be attached in an inopportune space in your body, and you're just going to be that person who gets injured a lot, and that's kind of bad luck if that's your lot in the athletic scheme, and especially if you have high performance dreams. But that's the nature of Olympics, is finding your limits. And I look at my 8 before the Olympics in 2008, and I would say everybody was dealing with an injury.
Wow.
At the Olympic Games, at the final, you had Kyle. He had a weird injury. It was with his finger, and me, I had low back. Behind me was Dom. It was his back. His back's still messed up from it. Behind him was Jake. Jake was his back too. Malcolm was his ribs and his back, and then Burns. Burns was okay, actually. Maybe he should have been training harder. And then Ben was his knees, and then Kevin would just get weird. He'd get weird diseases, like weird things, like blood clots and stuff. But but everyone, here comes the fire truck.
Yeah, it's coming down the street. Sorry. Yep.
No, but the most common injuries in rowing are tendonitis, low back, and rib fractures. And so for me, dealing with tendonitis, I made sure that I stretched my biceps quite regularly. I had this, I found that helped a lot within the rowing stroke. Also, from a technical aspect, if you hold out your hand, flat, in front of you, and now stick your middle finger to the roof, your middle finger to the roof, and flick it like that. And so if you're flicking it, my coach said, that's your Saturday night finger. It's not just for the girls on Saturday night. And and so he would say to hang on to the oar handles with your Saturday night finger. If you want something more PG, hold your hand like a rocker does with
like
your
rocker. Okay.
Like a rocker fingers. That's more PG. But again, just making sure that you're hooked onto the oar and you're relaxed around it. That was another thing that helped mitigate tendonitis. I got really bad tendonitis when I had first started rowing. Part of it is just your body adapting to the load too, and your tendons getting stronger. Ribs, I didn't have a lot of rib issues, and I think part of it was my adherence to a chiropractic regime. I made sure that my ribs and my spine were moving properly with one another, and that sort of mitigated against putting excess load. Also, I have a fairly muscular frame, so I think that helped out. You got guys like Malcolm who's had giant legs and lungs and just a tiny upper body. Those are more the guys who would break their ribs. The more rail thin guys with less muscle. And then low back was a big one for me, and it was tough. I was in and out of low back injuries from say 2003 through 2008, and I was down in a training camp. We were down in the Bay Area. About 6 months before the Olympic Games, I get off the water. Something feels kind of funny, and then an hour later, I can't get up from my bed, and
oh my God.
I don't know what it is. Can't move without extreme pain. Fly back to Canada, get a couple MRIs. Go to my doctor. He sits down, says, "Okay, Kreek, hang up your oars. You're not going to the Olympics anymore." And for me, that put me into a huge spiral of depression, because here I was, I'd taken off the last year and a half to go to this Olympic thing. I knew we had a great chance, and here I was seeing it slip away before me. And so I found myself just spiraling into kind of a deep depression, and I think that's, it can be one of the hardest things to deal with as an athlete is injury like that. And so, luckily we had access to sports psychologists. So I called up Bruce. I'm like, I'm not doing so well. I need to, let's figure this out. And so he comes down, and we go to a coffee shop, and he says, Adam, there's things in your life you can control, and there's things in your life you can't control. And he draws a little tiny circle on a big sheet of paper, and he slides it over to me. It's like, you can control what's in that circle, and there's so much that you can't control. You can't control that your back is injured, but you can control how you approach it. And he said another thing that resonated with me. He said, the goal remains. It's just that the path has changed. Because when you're injured, you're scared that other people are training and they're getting stronger and they're getting fitter, but you're not. That's the biggest fear. I'm stagnant. I'm staying still. I'm not getting better, but these other people, they're putting in the work and the effort, and they are getting better.
Right.
And, but he said, you know what? It's just a different way to get better. So instead of training as hard as you possibly can 3 times a day, I want you to heal as hard as you can 3 times every day. And so that's what I did. And an injury, my doctor, he thought it would take a year to get me back to functionality. And so I got a different doctor who said they'd work with me. And we started an injury that's supposed to take a year and a half to heal. We got me back on the water in 8 weeks. And I had started, I was able to get into the pool cross training in about 4 or 5 weeks. I was able to get back the rowing motion in about 6 weeks. And so it was a great medical team that I was able to work with to make this happen.
Would you mind sharing some of the, I guess, the rehabilitative and therapeutic like exercises you were doing that helped get you back on track?
Yeah. Well, again, I said I'm a big fan of chiropractic therapy. Make sure that you get a chiropractor who's well trained. And in the States, I know you can call yourself a chiropractor, but not necessarily have the same level of schooling. I know up in Canada, we have a college of chiropractic that has a bit more rigor to it. Maybe it exists in America now too. I'm not sure. So I went to the chiropractor who, he obviously did physical manipulations. He put me on a traction table. So it was basically this giant stretching machine that stretched me out. He got these giant metal, called them spoons, and he just dug them into my back and ripped it out. I did a lot of massage therapy, and I would kind of alter. We would do like massage, chiropractic, physio. I had an osteopath. I did some acupuncture. I had these magic lasers that went and shot lasers into my back.
Yeah, light therapy, laser light therapy.
And then I did, and I made sure my diet was full of anti-inflammatory foods, low inflammatory foods. And then I went to some energy healers who just did some, woo-woo work on me. And so I basically, from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, I said, I got to do everything I possibly can to make this body heal. And, what can I control today? And how can I try to, keep myself as positive as I can be, and follow the policies and procedures of medical professionals. And obviously where I worked with my doctor too, I got anti-inflammatories. I got injections. I got some cortisol injections. I got, rubs, that I'd rub on my body.
Yeah. Topical cream.
So it was just threw everything at it.
Yeah. Now, just because it wasn't clear earlier on, did you have a disc herniation, or is it mostly muscular?
It was I herniated 2 discs. I herniated my L4, L5, L5, S1.
Okay.
And it was
so right at the base of the lumbar spine and sacrum. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, it sounds like you had an amazing team around you that helped you. As you said, it wasn't the original path you were on, but the destination, the goal was the same, and helped you get back on track for sure.
Yeah, we made it work.
That's awesome. So, for the audience, probably a good takeaway would be, what do you think are some of the? Obviously, you mentioned chiropractor, but what are some of the rehabilitative exercises that you found most valuable that really worked for you? You would recommend people check out?
Well, activation regimes.
Okay.
So if you work with where you're doing quick light movements that activate all the different neuromuscular portions of your body, so to make sure that everything's firing. I found those to be very helpful. And basic stretches. It's hard to talk about on a podcast, really. I'd recommend visit a healthcare professional who knows how to manipulate the body. Work with a doctor who's willing to work with you. And I would also say, don't be afraid of pain. You move to the limit of pain. Too often people spend too much time in injury because they're scared of that pain. But you have to kind of constantly move to that limit of pain and just dance around the edges of it, and sometimes cross right into it. And that really speeds up healing.
Yeah.
Because it's teaching your body, hey, you know what? It hurts to do this, but I still need to move here. And your body says, okay, I guess I'll have to fix that.
Right. Yeah. So it's got to desensitize to it, but at the same time, you've got to sort of identify some movement patterns that you're capable of doing that are pain free, but test those boundaries so that you're aware of what you're able to do.
Exactly.
Awesome. And that kind of also segues nicely into, so for those in the audience that don't know, Adam and I connected. He wrote, one of his journal articles. It was on flexibility and injury prevention for rowers. And like one of the topics in the article was some of the work that Sarah Black, one of the physiotherapists for the men's Canadian team, is doing, and she's utilizing functional range conditioning and stuff. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, that article? And
yeah, well, Conlon McCabe is an absolute physical phenom. Grew up in Brockville, Ontario. He's 6'8", 245 pounds, pulls a 536 erg. I don't know. I remember seeing him when he was 16. I saw him in the club when he was 16, and he was pulling splits akin to, say, a senior level collegiate rower. And I was just thinking, this kid has got something special.
Wow.
So he trained under Mike Spracklin for 4 years, and then moved to Martin McElroy, who is he's a coach from Ireland and has a slightly different technical focus than Spracklin. Whereas Spracklin put a lot of emphasis on the back end of the stroke, lengthening the finish, leaning back a little bit. McElroy is all about lengthening out the catch. And what Conlon noticed was that he didn't have the flexibility in the ankles, the hips, the knees that he needed to get the proper length and actually maximize his immense power. Here you got a really long guy. He should be the longest stroke in the boat. And often tall guys get kind of lazy because they don't have to row that long. Whereas you see a guy who's like 6'1" in a boat, and you're just thinking, how does he row that long? Right. Imagine you got a 6'8" guy rowing like the 6'1" guy. Yeah. That's boat speed right there. And so he's been working with Sarah Black to use a methodology called functional range conditioning. It was invented by it's
chiropractor, Dr. Andre Ospina. Yep.
Yes, yeah, from Toronto, and it's fairly simple. I don't think it's overly proprietary. It's hold your stretches for 3 minutes or longer. That's the basis of it. It's get into a position and hold them, and then maybe put some weight against that stretch. And if you're working with a physiotherapist, that physiotherapist can get in there and like dig into your tendons and your muscles and help your body stretch out just a little bit more to the range that you want. And then once you've stretched out your body to that range, you have to then strengthen it with that new range. And so it's not just being flexible, it's being what we call mobile, having better mobility. And that's flexibility with strength. So if I can bend like a Gumby, I also want to be able to lift heavy weights when my ankle is over the back of my head. So it's
right.
It's combining those two. And so that's really been a focus for Conlon McCabe in the men's four for Canada. So we'll see how they do in the upcoming Lucerne Regatta and at the Rio Olympics.
Yeah, I'll be following and watching for sure. It looks like there's going to be some very fast racing this summer.
Yeah, it'll be a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah. Are you going to be watching all the events, or is there any in particular that you're? I mean, obviously the four, you have some teammates and stuff that are racing in there.
Yeah, well, I always watch the men's 8 just because it's the biggest, fastest boat. The single can also be interesting. I haven't been following too closely. I don't necessarily know the names in there. And the Canadian men's quad is trying to qualify. And so the Canadian men haven't really sent a fast quad in a long time. So it'll be interesting to see if they put anything together. And the lightweight women's double for Canada looks interesting too. So I'll be watching that.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit. We kind of talked a little bit about the open sea rowing and elite, but a little bit different vein. Let's discuss the differences between training at the elite and university, so collegiate level, and some of the restrictions that are placed upon athletes and how it can impact their training. So obviously the number of hours and sessions they can do, per NCAA rules, those types of things.
So I would say the hardest training I ever did was as a university athlete. And it wasn't because the training was necessarily harder, from a volume standpoint. It was because I was holding down a full course load. And there's a lot of exhaustion that comes from learning new skills. And guess what? Rowing is learning a new skill. So, I spent some time with the Stanford crew team just this past spring break. I was talking to a couple of the student athletes, and the guy was saying, I couldn't believe how much my stroke improved and how much my fitness improved just by training over spring break. And that was all I had to do. Wake up, eat, row, sleep, eat, row, repeat. And those, I think you can get really fit, as a college athlete while going to school. And I think there's a certain benefit to that too. And mm-hmm. I'd say the Olympic movement was originally founded on this ideal of amateurism and the fact that you're doing the sport on the side of your life. You're not doing it as the prime focus of your life. And that has been lost in the Olympic ideal. Now Olympians are essentially professionals. Some of them are paid really well. Some are not paid at all. But the same thing is, if you want to be competitive, you have to put everything into the training. But I think college athletics, university athletics really ascribes to that ideal ascribed by Pierre de Coubertin and the other founders of the Olympic movement, which is sport is an addendum to your life. It's an addition to your life that's there to make it better. And I think that lesson is not lost on the university athlete. And hopefully it's something that sticks with them for the rest of their life. You'll have obviously the 5% of university athletes who go on to professional sport or Olympic sport, but everyone else moves off to career and life and kids and that kind of thing. So, but how are you going to maintain some element of sport in your life until you die? Because sport just makes your life better. It brings in community, it brings in fitness, it brings in health, it connects you with nature, it connects you with yourself. There's so many positive benefits to it. So I would say it's difficult to be a university, varsity athlete, but the rewards far outweigh it. And there's some university athletes that are they're sitting there, and you're always thinking, should I quit? Should I stop? Should I move on to do something else? And I'd say more often than not, I see the athletes that quit their sport, their marks drop. They become addicted to some drug or some alcohol, or they have more problems. And it's, in fact, the sport actually helps you be a better scholar where you're at your school, especially if you approach it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. It requires a lot of focus and discipline, and there's a inherent structure to it because you sort of have chunks of time that are blocked out. So you have to be very efficient, with your free time and getting your studies done, and making sure you're recovering. And to your earlier point, I completely agree. I actually think it's training at the elite level. I wouldn't say it's easier, but it's more simple in the sense that your focus is just to train. And when you're at the college or university level, because you're training and going to class, the amount of stress that the athlete is dealing with is inherently higher. You have the physical demands from the training, and then you have hormonal, because they're still very young, they're still evolving biologically as a human being, and then you have the mental aspect. So it's like a social life, and then trying to study. And I think a lot of times when we look at training programs, we think, oh, well, the physical demands that we're placing on them during the training sessions or week to week, they're not that high. But then you have to factor in these other two variables that are a huge, huge component, and that really affects their ability to recover, day to day, week to week, month to month.
Well, and it's so that sort of idea and ideal is so important for the professionals who are out there listening to this, and and have their own training programs as well. And I know I've coached a couple of professionals, help them with their with their rowing and such. And when you're on a very heavy work schedule, you're traveling, you have a lot of demands. You can't put in the same kind of work, right? And you just have to realize that. And for me personally, training again has become an outlet to make my work life more enjoyable. And I put all my competitive drive into my work efforts now, whereas before my competitive efforts were in the sporting arena.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you're doing some great things and kicking ass and having fun too.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun.
Good, man. Good. So let's shift gears right to that, and let's talk about your work right now a little bit more in depth, and the awareness that you're trying to bring to athletes and the public about health and fitness, and then also what you're doing as a speaker and social entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I have a number of different things on my plate. What I've done in the last 8 years is I've built up a public speaking business where I travel to conferences, to annual general meetings, when associations get together or corporations get together. I go to universities, colleges, essentially wherever people get together. They want an interesting speaker to come in to motivate, to inspire, to educate. And I speak to various ideals in the fields of leadership, teamwork, health and wellness, change management. And this has been a bit of a gift, really. I've obviously worked very hard to build this business up, but I get to meet people from all different industries, all different walks of lives. I share my story of, I went to the Olympics, I lost. I went to the Olympics, I won. I rowed across the ocean, I almost died. You can see some of my work. I've got a TED Talk. If there are any people who like TED Talks out there, it's called I Seek Failure, and you can see a little bit of my work there. And so again, if you're organizing a conference, you're looking for a speaker, think of me. Send me a note through my website. We'd love to work with you. Secondly, I am a representative for the Canadian Men's Health Foundation, and it was founded by a prostate cancer doctor up here in British Columbia, who was somewhat frustrated with the people he was treating. He was seeing men in their 50s and 60s who had made poor lifestyle choices in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and were suffering the effects. And what was happening was the men were, for the last decade of their life, were becoming decrepit. They were becoming a big burden on their family. They were depressed, and their golden years weren't so golden. They were just, they were fading out instead of going out with a blast. So we've decided to create a campaign that motivates men in their 30s, 40s, and 50s to hop back on the health horse if you've fallen off. And it happens, right? You have kids, you have a career. There's lots of demands in middle age that really take you over. And when you make the right lifestyle choices, and it's pretty simple. It's simple stuff. Sleep right, move your body, eat whole foods, eat less crap. And talk to your doctor if you're having any issues. And these sorts of things, men taking control of their health, recognizing that they're not in it alone. Everybody suffers these sorts of things, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's physical health issues, setting yourself up to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be a better brother, uncle, whatever you might be. And I think it's just an important message to be putting out there. And I feel grateful that I'm able to support, pushing this message.
That's awesome, man. Outstanding. You're the right guy for the job carrying that torch.
Yeah. Well, and if people want to check it out, it's great. It's on Twitter. It's called Don't Change Much. @ Don't Change Much. And the website is Don't Change Much. You can sign up for a newsletter. Again, everything is science-based, but it doesn't throw science in your face. So you can trust that everything is very well researched and truth-based. But it has a bit of a kind of a motivational angle to it. So you read it, and it's really easy to digest, easy to read, give you tips like, if you're going out for beers with your buddies, don't change much. Just instead of just drinking beer all night, drink 1 glass of beer, 1 glass of water.
Right.
You order a burger and fries. Order half fries, half salad. Let's try that.
Right.
You're taking, the transit to work, get off 1 stop early and just walk a little bit further to your office, then walk back. And the idea is that a lot of small changes can really add up to make a really big difference in our lives. And I think if we approach health and wellness like that, sometimes you look at someone who's super fit and think, oh, they've got it all made. I can never get there. And maybe you can, maybe you can't, but that's not the way to think. The thing to think is, what's that one small thing I can do right now that can just make me a little bit healthier? And you take that one small step, that one small change, and it gives you a sense of confidence, a sense of self-esteem that motivates you to keep pushing along that health path, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your business, all this stuff that's super important for all the men out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great, Adam. Very cool. Very cool. I'll be sure to put those links for the website and Twitter in the show notes as well, so people can reach those.
Yeah.
So is there anything else, any other topics you want to cover before we head to the rapid fire questions?
Rapid fire questions. Well, we had talked about the supplementation regime that the Canadian Olympic team is using right now, and listeners might be interested in that.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's chat about that a little.
Yeah, because I found this interesting because I'm a user of vitamins and a user of supplements, and I know it was discouraged. This is an issue as a high performance athlete, especially with anti-doping. You want to be careful with the supplements you use because some supplement providers aren't careful and some slip in nasty stuff that is not legal, that doesn't follow the rules. But at the same point in time, we know that food is medicine, and food is fuel. And so if you put the right sort of fuel in your body's going to have a positive reaction to it. If you put the wrong food and the wrong fuel in your body at the wrong time, then your body's going to have a negative reaction. And the Canadian Olympic team brought on a great physiologist. His name's Dr. Trent Stellingworth, and he's put together a bit of a regime where all the athletes they have 5 protocols that they're working on right now. One is beta-alanine, which is an amino acid supplementation that they're using. The next one is creatine, which they found, again, it's relations to power output and ability to just ability to perform. Step back, beta-alanine helps boost the VO2 max, I believe. And then beetroot juice, they drink that after workouts and before workouts to help with nitric oxide production, help blood really flow to the muscles. Branched chain amino acids they take after workouts just to help with body repair, and they also have sodium bicarbonate supplementation to help buffer against lactic acid production.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine when you're training at that volume and that intensity, one, food is medicine. So you're going to need to eat healthy and clean because what you're putting in your body is going to have a big impact on your ability to recover and perform well. And, absolutely are probably going to need additional supplementation. But like you said, it's it's very important, for any athletes out there, both at the collegiate or elite level, to make sure that those are products that they can use and, are approved.
Yeah. And you want to make the sure. And again, the base is a healthy diet. Some people think that you can take supplementation, and some people get overly obsessed with supplementation, and that's not necessarily going to bring you up to a level.
Mm-hmm.
It's supplementation should just allow you to train a little harder and recover a little better.
Right.
But the firm baseline is complex carbohydrates, whole foods, good grains, great meats, high, lots of lots of plant fat. We usually do say 20% fat, 40% carb, 40% protein. That's usually how I break up my diet.
Currently, or when you were training?
When I was training.
Okay.
And currently.
Okay.
I find that's what works. That works for me. And obviously different people have different ways their body worked. It's funny. I tried that whole ketosis thing and just found that it didn't work. I was suffering anxiety attacks, and I felt great for like the first couple weeks. I'm like, oh, this is super cool. And then I really don't like this.
Yeah. So the ketosis is a low carbohydrate diet, and you're trying to go into a constant fat burning state.
That's true.
But you have a tendency to like almost be in a constant state of bonking. Like you're just on edge, and you don't feel like you have enough fuel, and you can't think clearly. So yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not for everyone.
No. And I found that there's even the scientific literature shows that, performing, VO2 max tests under ketosis, performance goes way down. And I like doing a lot of, that sort of training and that sort of work. And so I just found that I just didn't have the energy to push myself into the anaerobic threshold zone.
Right. And that's a great point that you're making right there, because, that type of diet might be great for an ultra endurance athlete, somebody that is, not going to go into an anaerobic state. They're staying primarily aerobic, and they're, racing for hours on end, whether that's triathlon or ultra running. But, as soon as you go into that anaerobic state, the fuel source switches from, oxidative and fat to glycogen, and that comes from carbohydrates. Gotta eat the carbs, baby.
Carbs are good. Just make sure they're not shitty carbs.
Right. So while we're on that subject, what would be some good carbs?
Well, brown rice, pasta, maybe brown rice pasta, quinoa.
Lots of green leafy vegetables.
Green leafy. Well, there's not a lot of carbs in green leafy vegetables, but
fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Lots of potatoes and, corn, peas. Yeah. Beans. It's like, if it's whole food and you have to if you have to cook it to eat it, that's great.
Right. Yeah.
And from a bread standpoint, I prefer like sprouted grain bread. I like Ezekiel bread.
That's good stuff.
Higher protein, slower burning. Sometimes you need higher glycemic foods when you have very, very high training loads. So you go for the more like white flour pasta sort of things, or white potatoes, to just boost you back up after you've completely depleted yourself. But it's always good to have a mix. And when you're young and you're training hard, right? We were eating, 10, 12,000 calories a day at the training center. So you're just eating. Yeah. Lots of fruits, like in a smoothie. Yeah. Frozen fruits, and I guess spinach has lots of carbs in it too. So you eat your spinach.
A lot of phytonutrients in the dark green leafy vegetables. That's all the antioxidants, and then you get some of the anti-inflammatory stuff in there. Throw in some turmeric.
Yeah. Oh, I love all speaking my language, lion.
That's right. That's right.
Roar. Let's go eat.
I know, man. I'm getting hungry. All right. Well, let's on that note, let's move to the rapid fire because I think we got some food questions in here for you, possibly.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So, okay, based on your knowledge and experience at this point in time, if you could go back in time 10 years ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Learn to meditate.
Awesome. What is your favorite strength training exercise?
Throwing rocks. Large ones.
I love this. Do you do that in your backyard?
Oh, by the ocean. There's lots of rocks by the ocean.
Nice.
Where I live.
Very cool. Very cool. How has your training changed present day compared to 10 years ago?
Less.
Wow.
It's more varied, right? I do tons of. I train to get out there and to do fun things with my kids, and climb mountains, go out in the ocean, go for hikes, that kind of stuff. I train to get out there. I'm not training to win anymore.
Awesome. Okay, we covered injury and stuff. What's one thing junior athletes should be doing more of to complement their training and their health?
Meditate.
All right. Okay. So you mentioned that twice, so that's important in your book. So what are some good, this isn't in there, but what are some good meditation practices or videos or books that they should seek out?
Find a course.
Okay.
Sit in a room with someone who's done it for 10, 20 years and learn from a pro. You can do self-help stuff. You can download apps. You can look online, but go to a meditation center and just figure out how to be still. Let the monkey jump around in the cage until it slows down, and understand how meditation works. As an athlete, you intuitively understand what meditation is, because when you're, say, perfecting your rowing stroke, that is a form of meditation. It's really focusing your mind. But understanding what meditation is and having a practice to do that, to think of, some athletes, they finish their practice and then they go and they play video games for an hour in between practices. And is that really going to help you recover for the next training session? No. Your mind is revved up, you're shooting people, and you're going to go to the next training session completely exhausted. But imagine you after your practice, you thought through what happened in the practice, and then you meditated on it, and then you just let your mind completely shut off for 20 minutes, and then you went on to other things. What a way to recover post training, and solidify the learning that you had in the training.
That's awesome. Well, the next question I had was, what's your best tip to improve recovery? But I think you're going to say meditate.
Meditate.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to add this in based on our convo right before these questions. So what's your, if you had to pick, what's your favorite meal? Right? You had to do one.
For what purpose?
Not necessarily post training session or anything, but just, what's your favorite meal? If you could go to the grocery store or cook a meal, what's your favorite, go-to meal that you really enjoy?
So I got a meal. You can put this in the show notes too. It was, I cooked it on television with Don't Change Much, with the Men's Health Foundation. It was with the chef. I'll send you the info and the link afterwards if I can find it.
Okay.
But it's salmon with special sauce and roasted veggies.
Nice.
So, and typically what I'll do is I'll roast cabbage, beets, potatoes, broccoli, cauliflower, just pick up whatever veggies are fresh and awesome, chop them all up, throw them in the oven for an hour, 2 hours, and then get salmon, cook it on the barbecue. Then I mix peanut butter with nut milk, and that's natural peanut butter, not with any of this hydrogenated, sugary poop that people put in it. Which is or you can use other nut butter like almond or
cashew
or whatever. Mix it with some sugar-free nut milk, and then put in some soy sauce or tamari. Dose it. It's incredible.
Wow.
It's one of my favorite meals.
Oh, I'm going to have to cook this. This sounds good, man.
Yeah, my mouth's watering.
I know. I see it. Your eyes are getting big. You're like, it's time to eat. All right. Last question. What's one book everyone should read?
The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Is that by Stephen Covey?
Stephen Covey. Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah,
and it's funny. It's one of those books that I keep rereading.
Nice.
I keep going back, and every couple of years, as you get older and more mature, you just find there's so much wisdom encapsulated in that in that one book. Covey did a great job. Rest in peace, Covey.
Very cool. I'll make sure to put that one in the show notes too.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, Adam, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy work and travel schedule to come on and share your knowledge and experiences, with the audience and rowing community. I know they will benefit a ton from it. So it's been great having you on. You too, Lion.
Awesome. I'll tweet you later.
Sweet. So just hang on the line. I'll stop the call, and then I'll give you a proper goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode of the Leo Training Podcast. I would greatly appreciate it if you take a moment of your time, head on over to iTunes, and drop in a 5-star review. Also, if you wouldn't mind sharing it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that'd be great as well. Please tune in next week when I interview Sarah Black, lead athletic therapist for Rowing Canada.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.